Captain Midnight.
So, the 98th Academy Awards will have happened by the time you're seeing this, and we'll know everything that won. At the time of recording, I don't yet. When it comes to actors though, I know someone who definitely didn't, and that's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who was gunning hard for an Oscar for his performance in The Smashing Machine. The best performance of his career, and one that he didn't actually get nominated for. The movie as a whole only scored one nomination for makeup and hairstyling. I think it's an interesting film and worth talking about, but in this video I wanted to go over something kind of adjacent to it, and that's The Rock's relentless push for the nomination that basically blew up in his face. I debated making this one, but ultimately I feel like this is worth taking a look at, because the dynamics of what happens when an actor that is as associated with action blockbuster filmmaking as Johnson is, tries to switch it up and shoot for the love of critics and the Academy is fascinating to me. The Rock wanted his RDJ and Oppenheimer moment, where he shows that he can go from franchise movies into dramas and win the biggest prize in Hollywood, and he may have wanted it a little too much. Before I get into it, thank you for watching. It genuinely means a lot to me, and if you often find yourself watching my videos and haven't subscribed yet, now could be the time.
Rock can't believe this little Rudy Pucciabroni has stolen all The Rock's signature moves.
He walks like The Rock. He talks like The Rock. He's got the rock bottom, the people's elbow.
I should probably set the stage a little bit. In case you missed it, The Smashing Machine is an A24 produced biopic sports drama written and directed by Benny Safdie. His first solo movie after co-directing great stuff like Uncut Gems and Good Time with his brother Josh. It tells the story of Mark Kerr, a two-time UFC heavyweight tournament champion and an important figure in the early days of MMA, whose career pinnacle in the late 90s and early 2000s also saw him working through an opioid addiction, overdoses, and, if this movie is anything to go by, kind of a train wreck of a love life. It may seem like playing an MMA fighter isn't much of a stretch for The Rock. Obviously, he's one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, and physically, he looks the part. But scratching the surface a little bit, the movie asks quite a bit from him that we haven't really seen before. Mark Kerr is definitely not The Rock's WWE persona. He's the farthest thing from it. Though obviously physically imposing and constantly on edge, the Kerr of Smashing Machine doesn't want to be perceived as some larger-than-life, deadly modern-day gladiator. In the early days of the MMA, when it was perceived by a lot of people as like a sadistic blood sport or a freak show, Kerr seems to want to buck that image. In the octagon, he cares about winning above all else, but in his dealings with the public and in business, he goes to great lengths to seem professional, mild-mannered, and polite. The most interesting thing the movie does, I think, is show us a man who is determined to seem well-adjusted and more or less normal in a ridiculously violent sport that's slowly taking everything from him, and is kind of asking him to be more of an over-the-top figure than he's willing to be. The Rock's Pain and Gain character may have thrived in the violent world of early MMA, but Mark is not that guy. And even though he wins a lot, he's struggling. Constantly trying to portray himself as a level-headed pro, even as addiction and the stress of, being hit in the head constantly, drag him farther and farther away from the sense of normalcy that he wants to retain, at least on camera. It's a great role for Johnson, and I think it's one that taps into his public persona in a way that we rarely see from him. The Rock tends to play fairly one-note action heroes, often with a wink and a nod to how over the top he is, or just a more comedic spin on that same basic archetype. But with Mark Kerr, you see a man trying to maintain a really strong facade outwardly, while he's literally almost always ready to burst into tears in private, struggling with the losses, with the stress of getting that next prescription, and with dealing with a highly dysfunctional relationship. Now, I don't want to be The Rock's armchair psychologist, I'm definitely not qualified for that, but it was hard to not think about the real Dwayne Johnson and his highly curated public image, and the way that started to crack online when Black Adam underperformed at the box office. The weird, coping social media posts and the denial, all kind of shattering the "this movie is gonna change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe" blustering. Underneath the highly manicured online and movie star persona, this is clearly a guy who cares what people think about him an awful lot. And I don't hold that against him or anything, but it's not something that his movie performances usually get anywhere near. The Smashing Machine feels like it's leaning into that, purposefully or not, and it draws out a much more worthwhile performance from him as a result. But I think it may be those same issues that made Johnson's Oscar campaign so awkward. Now, everything seemed to start off well enough. The Smashing Machine premiered at the Venice Film Festival, where it received a 15-minute standing ovation. That sounds great, but I think it may have actually worked against the movie. Here's the thing about Venice Film Festival standing ovations. They're dumb as hell, and they seem to happen for everything now. In 2025 alone, 3 different films at Venice received ovations of 15 minutes or more, including a documentary that clocked in at over 20. It got so goofy that Vanity Fair even wrote an article on it with the headline, "Hold your applause, the tyranny of film festival standing ovations must be stopped," which described the whole thing as a standing ovation arms race. Dwayne Johnson, though, was seemingly amazed by it, and started to cry during it. Now, I don't want to be mean about this. The guy is allowed to cry when the culmination of a project that's clearly important to him lands at its premiere so well. But to be a little cynical for a minute, it also felt pretty calculated. Something similar happened with Brendan Fraser when The Whale premiered in Venice a few years ago. He broke down crying, the video went viral, with almost everyone really happy for him, including The Rock, who commented on the video. And about 6 months later, Fraser was standing at the podium collecting a Best Actor Oscar. With Johnson, it felt a little more forced. I feel like he knew the template. Franchise actor, long career, crying at Venice, and then some Oscar gold at the end of it. And that seemed like it was working. When the ovation kept going and the tears came, the crowd went wild and it all looked really similar. The problem is, The Rock is not Brendan Fraser. Not because his performance was worse, I would actually argue it was better, but because Dwayne Johnson has spent like 20 years as a hit-making A-lister. That's not Fraser's story. He'd basically been exiled from Hollywood. When he got emotional in that moment, it read as a guy who had been through genuinely dark years finally being welcomed back. When Dwayne Johnson cried at Venice, some people felt moved, sure, but it was hard to forget that The Rock is one of the most carefully constructed brands in modern entertainment. And watching him cry publicly feels, fairly or not, like watching a brand execute an emotional pivot. That's not necessarily his fault, but I do think that's the case. Now, I think this all would have been a blip on the radar if he hadn't doubled and tripled down on the story once the press tour started. Like, he made the rounds. Fallon, Good Morning America, podcasts, and in almost every single one of those appearances, he retold the story of the standing ovation in great detail. It got so noticeable that Page Six was cutting together compilations of him retelling the story. He also started using the phrase radical empathy a lot. Again, that's perfectly fine, but he used it so often that it became clear, or at least looked like, this was the phrase that he and everyone at like The Rock Inc. had decided to make their central point of the press tour. It just felt like a guy trying to seem open and authentic, and doing that in the most contrived way possible. He also went on to talk about how he's been pigeonholed by Hollywood and that he's kind of been thrust into a lane where he just did what people expected of him. And again, that's fine. If he wants to start starring in more dramas, I'll be happy to watch them. But it feels a little disingenuous when he and his company were actively developing and producing those movies, like Red One. Like, he's not some regular working actor who just has to look through his few offers and take the work given to him. He's an A-lister who, more likely than not, decided that he needed to make a play for an Oscar. I mean, look at his slate of upcoming movies. He's got like live-action Moana, another Jumanji, another Fast and Furious. That makes sense for him, but it also makes it really hard to buy that he's just been dying to do more stuff like The Smashing Machine and has just been forced to be a huge franchise star instead. I don't think any of that felt very sincere, and it added up to what the Daily Beast called the thirstiest Oscar campaign of the season. The Academy smelled what The Rock was cooking, and they just weren't buying it. Now, I will say, I don't think Johnson's press tour is like why the movie got mostly ignored by the Oscars. I've praised his performance, but like, it is a flawed movie. It lacks the relentless manic energy of Uncut Gems or Good Time, and replaces it with some fairly limp pacing. And while Blunt and Johnson are both good, that relationship isn't interesting enough to anchor so much of the film around. It got respectable but not fantastic reviews from critics and from audiences, and kind of just straight up bombed at the box office, on a higher budget than what A24 typically goes for. So none of this helped. But I will always be fascinated by this press tour and the way it mirrors The Rock's character in the film. I really don't have any issues with Dwayne Johnson. If he keeps giving performances like this, I could imagine him winning that Oscar that he so obviously wants. But the way he went about it here just felt too forced and too contrived. And I think it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of trying to manage your public persona so much that it just starts to backfire. So it's been really hard for me as an adult to feel like I'm still improving, still working towards something. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people can relate to. That's why I really like recommending courses that actually click for a lot of people. And Brilliant's Quadratics course is definitely one of those. Whether I'm tackling algebra again, or just want to understand how some of these equations shape everything from physics to finance, this one breaks down the fundamentals more clearly than you'll find anywhere else. And that's really just the start of what Brilliant does. It's an interactive learning app built entirely around hands-on problem solving. Instead of just watching videos, you're actually working through puzzles and visual problems that make each concept stick. And that's for everyone, ages 10 to 110. It allows me to move at my own pace, no matter what my schedule looks like that week. Building small learning habits each day really adds up, and Brilliant makes that way more doable with streamlined lessons, progress tracking, and courses designed by experts from places like Stanford, MIT, and Google. You can learn anywhere, on your phone or computer, and I've been impressed by how much better the platform's gotten over time. To start learning on Brilliant free for a full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/midnight, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, unlocking unlimited daily access to everything Brilliant has to offer. That's brilliant.org/midnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.